Hello and welcome to another edition of Blackwater Insights. Today I am joined by Henry Jim, who is with the Bloomberg ETF Intelligence team. And today we're going to take a look at what happened in the European ETF landscape market last year in terms of flows. So Henry, thank you so much for being here as always. Obviously we know your team, the Bloomberg ETF Intel team, has been really great about providing data and looking at flows, new issuers, and all of that. And last year, 2022 was, as we all know, a pretty ugly year in terms of returns for equities and fixed income. But as always, ETFs remain resilient. And globally, ETFs took in a net inflows of $867 billion for the year, which is really impressive, just given how bad markets were last year. But let's drill down to Europe in terms of flows and what you and the team are seeing. Can you give us a little bit of color on what happened in 2022?
Sure. First of all, thanks for inviting me again, Andrea. Always a pleasure. And Happy New Year as well.
You too.
In terms of flows for Europe, we saw 80 billion in inflows for 2022. That makes up less than 10% of the global inflows, but still, it shows that Europe is not really pulling its weight, but still, the story is that the inflows were positive in the end. What's also interesting about the inflows in Europe is that it reflects the general trend globally, which is that 35% of the inflows were in fixed income versus 65% in equity. And that contrasts with the fact that in terms of assets, fixed income only makes up 25% of assets in Europe of ETFs, and 75% of assets are in equities. So we're seeing a really increased interest in fixed income ETFs as an investment vehicle here.
Yeah, and that's good for firms like Tabula, which are focused on all fixed income ETFs. So that's interesting to hear. And I did read, a couple of the globally in terms of the flows. A couple sectors did really well, like defensive sectors, which makes sense given the market environment last year. So like healthcare, for example, and utilities, and as you mentioned, fixed income. So government fixed income bonds, ETFs. But so I recently saw an article that you were quoted in that ETF Stream did in terms of a recap of 2022. And there was a great chart in there, a graph of the ranking of ETF issuers. And what I noticed was, obviously BlackRock's always number one on the top, doesn't matter what location you're in, but there's been a lot of chatter about Amundi trying to take over that spot. What are you seeing in terms of like last year, the flows, like the league of ETF issuers? Did you see anything noticeable like with any of the big players and what they saw in terms of flows?
I'll get back to Amundi in a sec, but I think in terms of issuer flows, what really caught my attention last year was that iShares took the lion's share of the ETF flows, but that's because of their sheer size and breadth. And also, of course, they've been around for the longest. But I found the most interesting issuer last year was Vanguard. They took in on a per product basis 3 times the amount of iShares. So they took in on a per product, they were taking in about 300 million per product across, I think, 34 products. Whereas iShares only took in about 100 million. So that was really interesting. In terms of Amundi, they ended the year 2022 with about 200 billion in assets versus, 600 billion that iShares has. iShares still has a fairly tremendous lead. I think flows for Amundi weren't that great last year either total or on a per product basis. Having said that, though, they are the European player in ETFs. So it's best to keep an eye on them. I mean, they're only a third of the total assets of iShares. From what I've seen, they're really ramping up the distribution, their marketing. They're finishing up their digesting the acquisition of the LifeStore lineup. So this might be a pretty interesting year for Amundi in terms of competition with iShares.
Let's look at 2023. And I recently saw that someone in the US predicted that we're going to surpass $1 trillion in net flows for 2023. So do you have a call on where you think flows will be, whether it's positive or negative, either in Europe or globally, and also any particular trends that you're going to be paying attention to for the year?
Well, I can't really talk to global flows, but for Europe, this last year, we saw 80 billion in inflows. We did not. That's only half of the flows of 2021, which was 160 billion. We had 106 billion in 2020. I would say, regardless of where the market goes this year, we're going to see European flows break the 100 billion again, positive. I don't really see any possible scenario where it's negative, maybe regulatory, but ban that. I think we're on track to good inflows for ETFs. For the main reason that ETF as a vehicle is being more widely accepted, and also I think there's also investment trends, specifically in fixed income, and ETFs are the vehicle of choice in fixed income right now, seems like, in Europe, and will continue to be so. So I think we'll see really big positive flows in Europe again.
Yeah, no, I think also the other thing too is going to be very interesting to watch is who are the new players that come into the market. Some of the firms that had entered the market in 2022, so XIM, Finico, Hashdex.
Scalable,
thank you, yes. So it'll be really interesting to see who else jumps into the pool with everyone this year. And I think we're going to see some larger asset managers who decide to finally pull the trigger. There's a lot of press. I mean, obviously there's always press around ETFs, but I think there's increasing awareness and education around the European ETF market, particularly with now we have a lot of white label servicing providers who are going to bring even more awareness to those larger asset managers who are potentially on the fence about whether to enter the market or not. And I think that could be a big driver as well this year. So definitely an interesting space to watch. And we'll have to recheck the video at the end of December 2023 to see if your prediction is right, Henry. But thank you again so much for your insights. We always appreciate, working with Bloomberg, the Intel team, and hearing your thoughts, Henry. So for those of you who are watching, if you'd like to watch any other videos like this, you can go to blackwatersearch.com, and thank you for watching.